Welcome back to the Bible in History. I'm Jeff Johnson, and with me, of course, is my mother, Rebecca Johnson. We're going to continue today talking about Abram and the birth of Ishmael. Very interesting and bit of history that still affects us today. Just kind of goes to prove that your actions will follow you and sometimes surpass you. I'm going to begin by reading Proverbs chapter 16, verse 25. There is a way that seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death.
Yes. So last time we talked about Abraham and Lot separating. Abraham had been promised a son. He'd been promised a son of his own with Sarai.
Yes.
And time has passed. And Sarai does not see that God's in control. And so she's going to take things in her own hands. And whenever we take anything in our own hands, disaster happens, like the verse said. So Sarai convinces Abram to have relations with Hagar, the Egyptian slave they brought back with them. So we had already discussed the dangers then. They went into the world and the dangers. And this is an important part of history because this one action is still affecting us today. So Abram does go, and he has a child by Hagar. And that child is Ishmael. Well, that one decision by a woman who convinced a man, and I know this is like a history podcast, but the truth is history repeats itself.
It does. Very much so. Constantly repeating.
Yes. So in this particular episode, I really want to focus on the fact that history repeats itself, and it is really true. If you would learn from history, you could stop it from repeating, at least in your own family. If you can't control the governments of the world, which obviously we can't, it's total chaos right now in 2021, but a bunch of idiots running the world. But we may not be able to control them, but we can definitely control our own families and our own family history. So this particular spot of history is really interesting because we are learning a valuable lesson here. So Abram does in fact have a child by Hagar, whose name is Ishmael. And that one moment of disobedience, that one moment of lack of faith, that one moment that it seems right in my own eyes, leads to death. Because Ishmael is the father of the entire Arabian descendant group, which ipso facto, even though he himself, I'm very aware, Ishmael himself did not found the Muslim religion, his descendants did.
Yeah.
And so thanks to one woman convincing one man in a moment where they had lack of faith, where they had an idea that they could fix it on their own without God, basically.
Yeah.
Has now brought us, and how long ago was this? Yeah. It was like about 1900 BC. This is 2021 AD. And
we're coming close to about 4,000 years, and we're still dealing with the repercussions of the one choice to sin.
Exactly.
It's just mind-boggling.
It really is. And so this is one of those really great moments that you can show teenagers, that you can show young people. Your decision literally can affect the entire world. Do you think for half a second that Sarai and Abram, at that moment when Ishmael was born by Hagar, did they realize that they were just ushering in 4,000 years of chaos? No, of course they didn't. They never thought that one decision would literally change the course of the world, but it did. And our decisions do the same thing. So now we have an anti-God, anti-Jewish, anti-Christian, anti-biblical group. And this is 2021 when we're recording this. And for posterity's sake, I will just say that unfortunately, we have a very bad president in America, President Biden, who just pulled the troops out of Afghanistan, and the Taliban has taken over in an astounding way, which is a Muslim group. So, literally death, okay? Their decision has literally brought death. The Taliban just slaughters as they go. And for all those women who believe in women's rights, hello, Muslims are the least of women's rights. So really, 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 really bad decision.
Yeah, and again, this is a history podcast, but applying it to our own lives, one bad choice can affect you forever. A lot of times we'll take sin and be like, oh, I can do it this one time. Well, what's it matter if it's one time?
Yes.
Well, exactly. Abraham had one time and then managed to create an entire society that everybody hates.
Yes, exactly.
And so your one time, perhaps it won't lead to an entire group of people that like to kill people, but it will lead to something bad.
Yes.
Guaranteed.
Exactly.
The one time could either lead into multiple other times that lead you down a very bad road, or maybe it'll come back to bite you somewhere in the end, later down the road. You never know how it's going to come back, and you can never predict it. You can't ever calculate the cost of sin. And
right.
And the cost is always higher than you want to pay. And we see this here with Abram. Abram wanted peace. He wanted to fulfill the Lord's promise, and Sarai likewise. They wanted to do a good thing, but the way they did it was bad. And this goes to, you can't do a wrong thing for a right reason. Exactly. You have to do right things for right reasons.
And that's
wrong things, wrong things for right reasons or wrong things for wrong reasons are both bad.
Right.
Because you're doing wrong. And it will come back to bite you in the end.
Yeah. So here we go. Ishmael has been born, and what's more tragic, and I know, again, I realize it's a history podcast, but this is really relevant to today.
Yes.
And that's something we want you to understand. History is fascinating because it is relative to you today. It is not just something dried up and dead.
Yeah.
It's a very active thing. And so Ishmael is born, while later, when Isaac, the actually promised child, comes along, thus the conflict in the Middle East, because technically the first son should get everything, which would have been Ishmael, but God was very clear that Ishmael could not have it, and that it had to be given to Isaac. But that doesn't stop the conflict. And so Ishmael is an older child at this point, and he makes fun of Isaac at a party, and Sarai, this is all her own fault anyway that he's there, throws a tantrum, which is what often happens when our sin comes back to bite us.
Yep.
And kicks Hagar and Ishmael out of the home. And Abraham doesn't really do anything to stop it. So literally Hagar has become a single mother. Nothing new under the sun, guys. Nothing. And so here is Hagar as a single mom. Now, I want us to keep that in mind because we can see that the people group that he founded are very violent people to this day. And I will not apologize for saying that. Muslims and the Middle East is a very violent place. They're violent people. But here's something very interesting. It isn't just Muslims. Single mother homes are the plague of all society. Here's a bunch of statistics about single parent homes, and by that 95% I believe is women, not men. Okay, so we're talking about not having a father figure in your home. Okay, a father. Under a single parent home, 63% of all youth suicides come from fatherless homes. 70% of all teen pregnancies come from fatherless homes. 71% of all teens that have chemical and substance abuse come from fatherless homes. 80% of all prison inmates, fatherless home. 90% of all homeless and runaway children come from fatherless homes. Children brought up in a single mother home are 5 times more likely to commit suicide, 9 times more likely to drop out of high school, 10 times more likely to abuse chemical substance, 14 times more likely to commit rape, 20 times more likely to end up in prison, 32 times more likely to run away from home. That's ridiculous. And here's something very interesting. 70% of all the teen births that occur are to girls in single mother homes. Another interesting thing is that two-thirds of all children who are murdered by their mother, and typically in single family or single mother homes. The plague of being in a single mother home is still affecting us today.
Yeah.
Hagar's situation was tragic. But instead of trying to find a godly figure to put in front of her child, she didn't. And then she would proceed to take a wife for him out of Egypt, which is where she was from, bringing further paganism into her home, which is typically what happens. So this whole mess is still happening today. We still have the whole conflict we call it the conflict in the Middle East, but let's face it, Muslims are taking over Europe in mass. Europe will not be Europe in 20 more years. It will be another Muslim state. They're taking over Africa. They're in direct competition with China to take over the world.
Yeah.
And both China and the Muslims are really running hard. And quite frankly, both of them are a lot stronger than the whole I don't know what I am crowd. So all you people that aren't sure if you're a guy or a girl, just wait till the Muslims get a hold of you. You'll figure it out real quick. So this whole nightmare scenario, this whole just nightmare rabbit trail of destruction is still going on today. Because we haven't taken the time to learn from history.
Nope.
And we are really repeating it. So, an interesting bit of history here.
Yeah.
So,
and this is especially with the situation between Hagar, Sarai, and Abram. This affects us not in just the Muslim region, but we can learn from this situation in personal lives.
mm-hmm.
We see, of course, the problems that arise with affairs and immorality and all that kind of stuff. This was all because of one very important sin that the Bible addresses very clearly,
Yes.
very frequently, of
Indeed.
immorality and staying pure to your wife. And so we see the problems that arise here. We, of course, saw the statistics of a single
Right.
mother and how that affects the family. And we see throughout all the Bible, God constantly trying to affirm that you have to have a husband and a wife in the family. You stay together. This is why
Right.
God hates divorce so much, because it
Right.
splits the family apart. And we see that Satan has been very effective
Yes.
in breaking these families apart.
Yes.
And we don't realize that it's Satan trying to destroy lives. We look at it, oh, we're not compatible, all this true love and feeling. We look at how we feel about
Right.
all these different things.
Right.
And we completely ignore how this will affect. And we can see this through history. We can see this in the Bible. There's so many different areas you can look at and be like, oh, if I follow my feelings, this will be bad for me. But we don't do that. And we ignore history, we ignore the Bible, and we go for how we want to feel because it makes us happy in the moment.
Right.
And while God does put a lot of limitations on us, those limitations aren't to keep us from happiness. They are to give us better, more long-lasting, enduring happiness in the long run. God cares about the whole life. We care about the here and now. And when we care about the here and now, we do stuff that makes us happy right now.
Right.
But it won't make us happy tomorrow or a year from now or 5 years from now. God gives us restrictions and limitations, and we can be upset today, perhaps. But the truth is, if you really, go through it all, you'll be happy today. You'll be happy tomorrow. You'll be happy a year from now. And following God makes that happiness grow.
Right. Right.
But Satan doesn't want that. Satan wants to destroy our lives, and we listen to Satan's whispers. And let him dictate, and we see this again with Sarah and Abram.
Right.
Sarah let Satan dictate how she went about. She was worried.
She did.
She was very concerned about, all these things, and she got it in her head that I can solve this problem. We as humans can't solve these problems. God can. And when we listen to God, everything works out greatly. And we see this in many other examples in the Bible. When people followed God, they were happy. Paul followed God, and he got killed once, and he was still happy.
Yes.
Like, that's some extreme stuff right there.
Yes.
You literally get killed, and you're like, nah, it's fine. I'll keep going. This stuff's great.
Right. True happiness. It's
yeah.
a true happiness.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a true happiness. Yeah. So, yeah, an odd but important point in history, and something to keep in mind, that all of us have that potential to completely alter the course of history. And imagine if he'd never had Ishmael.
Yeah.
What would the Middle East be like today? How many people would not have died today because of that one decision? So don't think that your one decision is not going to affect everyone. It does. It affects down through the course of history, much more far-reaching than we ever imagine.
Yeah.
So yeah, interesting. Next time, we'll talk about some of the people group what was going on around the world around this time, the time of Ishmael and Isaac's birth. A whole lot going on around the world.
Yeah.
History is just really exploding at this point, so it's getting exciting. And we want you to see that all this is going on. So Abraham's making this one stupid decision that's going to affect the world, but the world's
around
still
being built.
Yes, the world is still going, and a lot of decisions are being made around the world. And we're going to find out about those next time. Looking forward to it. So,
yep. We hope
yay.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Bit of an interesting one. If you are interested in learning about how to keep your family strong, we did talk about that a lot. My parents both have another podcast, Building Families in the Faith. That's on YouTube and Spotify and all the other podcast applications that you can find. So go ahead and look that up. Try to build your family so that you don't have the same mistake that Abram and Sarah have.
Yes.
Screw things up forever. Build a strong family, and they teach you all that kind of stuff over there. So I'd encourage you to look at that. Join us next week as we continue looking at the history, and we'll look forward to seeing you there.
If you enjoyed today's video, please like and subscribe to our channel.
You can also follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Audible, and Google Podcasts.